Have you ever thought about that? Like, what would it take for you to marry a just totally random stranger? Welcome to Author Chat, featuring this lady. We're talking behind the scenes information, the inspiration, and everything it took to write this book. Nichols here. I'm really excited to talk to you today about Flame and Ember. My first Regency romance book. I thought it would be fun to sit and answer some questions about the process behind making it, why I wrote the book, and just other things that have come up over the years that readers apparently want to know. So let's begin.
Hold on to your butts.
Real quick, major spoiler warning.
Warning! Warning! Warning!
If you have not read Flame and Ember yet or listened to it here on YouTube, please make sure you do it before listening to this, because I will be talking about major spoilers in the book. So you've been warned. So that is a big question. I started off writing in fantasy. I happen to love a lot of different genres. I am a fan of a lot of different genres. I'd always planned on writing a lot of different genres, but when I started publishing and really diving into being an author, I wanted to start off in fantasy because I love fantasy. It's one of my favorite genres. But I'd always planned on writing historical romance at some point. It's something that I am excited about and I do love.
I love you. Most ardently.
But it wasn't something that was high on my priority list at that time. I really wanted to get myself established in fantasy.
I have a plan.
Then my sister asked me a very interesting question. For those of you who don't know, I am single. I have never been married. I have never come close to marrying. But my sister asked me, would I ever consider a marriage of convenience? And
That is without a doubt the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
I honestly have no interest whatsoever in marrying for marriage's sake. Don't get me wrong, love the idea of marriage, would love to be married. I certainly would love to have a husband and kids and all that whole kit and caboodle sounds awesome. Sign me up for it. But the idea of marrying purely for the sake to just get married, no, it's just not my cup of tea. Thank you very much. So I gave her very swift and firm no.
No! No! No!
And then it got me thinking, though, of what would be a scenario in which I would agree to a marriage of convenience. Like, have you ever thought about that? Like, what would it take for you to marry a just totally random stranger? Like, oh my gosh. And first off, I knew straight away it would have to be at least a couple hundred years ago, because I would have to have no other recourse, in a time when women didn't have a lot of options. I mean, like right now, I have a wonderful job. I have a wonderful home. I'm able to support myself and take care of myself. So why in the world would I just want to marry just for the sake of marrying? Like, oh no, it sounds, oh, seriously, ugh. But in Regency times, Victorian times, that wasn't an option. So that idea kind of came and started wriggling itself into my brain and just wouldn't leave me alone. And so eventually I decided to try and write it. I had a little bit of downtime and I started working on it a little bit, but honestly, it didn't go very far. I wrote maybe a couple thousand words, which is not even a chapter's worth. But I put it aside and got back into my regular fantasy worlds and playing with those. Then it was about, that was February of 2017. Then in about November of 2017, I hit a really tough time in my publishing career.
Oh, I'm fine. It's just that life is pointless and nothing matters, and I'm always tired.
At that point, I had been working for over 2 years. I had published, I believe it was 5 books at that time, 4 to 5 books at that time. None of them were doing well. They were all absolutely failing spectacularly.
The worst. She's the worst in the world.
Your first book never takes off, and it takes time. But I kept throwing more up, putting more and more into that fantasy books, really trying to get them to take off. And They just didn't go anywhere. And that is really disheartening. Can I just tell you, it is very disheartening. And I just, I needed a break.
3 words for you. Treat yourself.
I just needed to write something for fun, just for me. And so I sat down and started writing Flame and Ember. And like I said, I'd written a few thousand words, maybe that much. But I just started writing with the idea that, oh, I'll write, you know, for a couple weeks and then I'll put it aside and continue with my other books. Well, I started writing and writing and writing and writing. And I wrote the first half of the book in about 2 weeks. I wrote the second half of the book in about a week. I've never before nor since ever had a time like that where the words just flowed. Again, fast as I have ever written a book. I don't expect that to ever happen again. But I had this book and it was finished and I loved it. And but I knew it didn't fit in with the current plans that I had for my career. Like, this isn't a fantasy book.
One of these things is not like the others.
I'm not ready to jump into historical romance. I'm just not ready for it. And so I put it aside, just thought, you know, I'll hold on to it for now. Sometime in the future, I will publish this thing, but not right now. Then it was only a couple months later, I had a major headache. The book that I was writing at the time was not cooperating at all, and it was taking way too much time. And so I had to bump back the publication date for it. And that meant I had a hole in my publishing schedule. And I was very, very firm on, I wanted to publish regularly. I wanted to hit my deadlines because I know me. If I start letting deadlines slip, everything is gonna, The minute I start letting myself skip things or not hit deadlines and stuff like that is the minute that everything just, nothing gets done. I honestly am super lazy, naturally lazy, like super duper naturally lazy. I have to keep the momentum or I'm done for. So I was like, you know what? I have this book, Flame and Ember, out. Ready to go. All I need to do is run it through my edits, send it to my critiquers. Like, it's ready to go. And so I did. I spent the next few months writing it for publishing and then just kind of threw it out there.
Okay. Cool. No doubt.
I published it. I told my fans about it, the 3 fans that I had about it, and then just kind of went about my business, went back to writing my fantasy novels and didn't think much of it. And then I started, of course, you watch your sales, and I sold a couple books. I mean, up until this point, for me, a good month was selling 1 every other day, maybe. Like, honestly, my best month that I'd had up to that point, I had sold 50 copies, I think, in 1 month. And that was a fluke. That was mostly it was a book launch and all of my family and friends bought it. That was about it. So like, it was just not going nowhere. And suddenly Flame and Ember's up there and I was selling 2 or 3 copies a day. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. That's kind of neat. But I'm still typing away on my fantasy novel and I'm just, but I'm kind of watching that in the background. And within a week or two, I could see my sales not only were not dropping, they were building and growing. Pretty soon I was selling 6 and 7 copies a day. And I just knew historical romance is where I'm supposed to be. And so I can't not finish writing a book. So I finished the fantasy book I was working on. Like I said, I can't just, I have to finish things. I have to do things on time or it gives me way too much permission to not do anything. So I went through and finished that fantasy book, and oh my gosh, which was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do writing wise, because I'm watching my sales. They're just rising and rising and rising, and I know no one's gonna read this fantasy book. No one cares, but I cared, and so I was gonna finish it. And besides, I still love that book. Anyway. But I knew that was it. That was it for me. I knew that I was pivoting now, and I was going to switch to historical romance, and that's what I did. The minute I was done with that, I started working on A True Gentleman, which was the next one in the series, and yeah, and the rest is history. I now am a historical romance writer. There's no character that I've ever written who is based off of one other person. Honestly, I've never done it. I don't think I ever will. But I absolutely 100% borrow from reality all the time. And there is very much a part of me in each one of the characters I've written. Well, with a few exceptions. Honestly, there's quite a few villains who I absolutely identify with.
If you only knew the power of the dark side.
There's a lot of aspects of my stories that are absolutely inspired by reality, often my own life. Mina is not me. She is absolutely not me, despite the fact that my life and my thoughts actually, my life and my sister's question inspired me to write this book. Mina is not me. But she is definitely a character that I greatly identify with. She is someone who I knew when I was coming up with her character that I knew she needed to be someone who wasn't perfect. I am a big girl myself. I am plus size and extra tall as well. I'm 6'2", so I am built like a refrigerator. And because of that, honestly, I do have a really hard time with the fact that I feel like most historical romances feature these beautiful, perfectly delicate creatures who, if they have a flaw in their character, it's that they care too much, or they're these picture perfect princesses. Not always, but far too often. And I really wanted a heroine who I could identify with, and frankly, that people like me could identify with.
Who wants to smear makeup on my face?
Oh, you're already so beautiful, Brenda. What would be the point?
And so first up, I definitely wanted her to be plus size. That was just never a question for me, is I wanted her to be quite plus size. And I've had a few people here and there who'd say that I'm fat shaming, or that there's too much obsession about Mina's weight. But her experience with it is very much my own experience. It is something that does define you in many ways. I have worked hard to not make it define me. Like my own sense of worth and value has nothing to do with what I look like on the outside. I have fought hard to reach that point in my life. But I can tell you right now, when you are plus size, when you are a fat chick, that is what people see first and foremost. And it is something that is very, very difficult to deal with. And so I wanted her to struggle with that. And I love characters who are flawed, who overcome their flaw, and it's, people talk about wanting Hallmark endings where everything ends up happy and perfect. And I don't necessarily want happy and perfect, but I want my characters to come out the other side as better people. To me, that is the fantasy, is that after a struggle, after a hardship, that I come out the other side a better person. Because honestly, I can deal with hardship as long as I can learn and grow from it. Like, if something good comes from it, from me growing, then okay, great, let's do this. And I will be honest, it doesn't always happen. I'm a flawed person, and I don't always rise to the occasion. So I love seeing my heroes and heroines be thrown into difficulties and rise to the occasion. With that, I did want Mina to be very soft-spoken. I am an introvert. It may not look it, because I can fake being an extrovert for talking to people in situations like this. I'm talking to a camera, so I can fake it with the best of them. But I am, in personal relationships, I'm very much an introvert, and I honestly, I feel like a lot of the reasons why I'm able to fake being an extrovert is because of a lot of the opportunities that have been afforded me as a modern woman, being able to go out into the workforce, being able to, like I attend writing conferences and I teach and I do all these different things that force me as an introvert to develop extroverted tendencies and in small doses. and so I really wanted a character who was more of a product of her times. And so Mina is really quiet. She is a bit of a doormat at times, it's true, but I'm sorry. If it's something you've never struggled with, then you won't understand it, period. I get it. You won't understand. but all my fellow doormats out there, I know you're out there. I know you're watching. We know what's up. And we know how hard it is to stand up for ourselves. Because it isn't easy, and it isn't easy. I know it's easy for some people, but it's not easy for everyone. And so I really kind of wanted her to be a doormat, and I wanted her to be someone who struggles with that, because I've been there, I've done that. But I feel like I've been given more opportunities to overcome that than she would have ever been given. Now, Simon. Oh, dear Simon. I very specifically chose not to have a hero who was dashing, handsome, smooth with the ladies. If I'm gonna make Mina a real person, I didn't want to then pair her with this perfect Adonis of a man who always seems to know what the right things to say. And there are men out there who are like that. I've written men who are at least good with their words. Simon is not. I wanted him to be a real person. And the reality is that oftentimes men don't necessarily understand how they come across to women. Women as a whole, and I know I'm generalizing, and I know not everyone's like this, just put a big asterisk on this comment, but in general, women are very nitpicky about everything. I know with my friends, when we were wondering about if a guy likes us or not, we would analyze everything he did. I mean, every little movement, every little word, every tone. Like, we read so much into everything.
I love signs. First they were small. Like at first when I called, he said, "Good to hear from you."
And the guys just don't see it. They have no clue. Their attitude is, if I didn't say I liked you, then I don't like you. If I haven't asked you out, then I didn't want to ask you out. You know, and I wanted to capture a little bit of that. And I knew that he wouldn't necessarily be popular with everyone, because that is part of the romance fantasies, that we want these perfect men who just adore us and know how to handle everything. And I didn't want that. I wanted a real man. And because of that, Simon is clueless. He's clueless about the fact that he's met Mina before. He's clueless about the fact that he truly, and let me set this record straight, Simon does not flirt with Susanna. He never intends to flirt with Susanna when she shows up at the end of the book. Never intends that at all. But he's not aware of how people interpret his actions because he's clueless. He was just being, in his mind, a good host. I'm being kind to this woman. I'm chatting with her, and while yes, he was drawn to her in a way that he shouldn't have been, he wasn't intending to ever attract her that way. Let me just put that on the record. But I wanted a guy who was going to be frustrating at times. The reality is I want real people in my book. And sometimes real people are flippin' annoying and they may not speak to you. And that is totally okay. Absolutely okay. Like, it does not bother me when people say they don't like certain books of mine, or they don't like certain characters of mine, or a certain character irritates them. I don't mind that, because the reality is, you know, people who are, say, extremely extroverted don't necessarily understand introverts, and they might find introverts annoying. I know, I've been on the receiving end of that sometimes, you know, and people who are introverts don't always understand extroverts, and vice versa, and all these different things. And so I want people who are real, and that with real people, it means sometimes you're not going to like them. It's okay. Okay, there are a couple things in my book that are very much inspired by real things that have happened to me. First and foremost is Mr. Smith. So at the very beginning of Flame and Ember, Mina is struggling with her place in her brother's household. She's struggling to know what to do with herself. And meanwhile, a Mr. Smith starts beginning to show some interest in her. And she's not interested in him, but he's interested in her, and everyone thinks she should be interested in him. And she has a lot of frustration with this. And that actually happened to me once. I'm not going to go into all the different ways that my Mr. Smith was a horrible choice for me. But let's just say that he was one ginormous red flag. I mean, made of like millions of little red flags. I mean, so many red flags. They were everywhere. And it was the kind of thing where I just didn't understand why anybody thought I should go after him. I was about 32, 33 or so. And basically this man at church, his mother drags him over and insists on introducing him to me. He didn't ask to introduce himself. I mean, like, she forced him into it just about. And then we had an extremely awkward and uncomfortable conversation, which he said maybe 5 words to me. His mother carried most of the conversation. And then that was it. And I was kind of like, I was really confused about this, but I mean, I was like, okay. And, what little I knew of this guy did not recommend him.
Do I look like someone who would waste my own time?
It was like maybe a week later, he called me and invited me, asked me out on a date. Or at least I thought it was a date because, he was talking about let's go hiking and everything. Then come to find out that it was me, his mom, and him. Like the 3 of us. Boo! Now, I thankfully found out before I went on it, because I was not going to get in the middle of that. But I'm not going to ever, will never go on a date with the guy's mommy. No, sorry, no. But yeah, and so like, it was just this really weird, all of this was this really strange interaction.
You are a sad, strange little man, and you have my pity. Farewell.
And all this time, everyone's like, oh my gosh, don't give up on him. You never know, you never know. And I had this very profound moment where I realized, I'm like, oh my gosh, if I was 20, nobody would want me near him. But I'm 32, I'm 33. I'm now in my 30s. I'm an old spinster now.
Ha ha, you're old.
And because of that, I need to lower my standards and give a chance to a guy who I would never consider in any other scenario. So that was a little rough. Okay, one other way that my book was directly inspired by my own history is the character of Susanna Banfield, the villain of this piece, or one of them. There's a lot of them in this book, but Susanna Banfield, while not every aspect of Susanna is there, her personality and her relationship with Simon is absolutely based off of a type of woman I know, but very specifically a situation that I was in where I had a guy that I was head over heels in love with. This guy, I mean, so in love with him.
I love you, I love you, I love you!
This guy, I was his friend. I'm one of those girls who's always in the friend category. Guys don't see me as a woman. They don't see me as female. I'm one of their buds. And it doesn't matter if I dress up feminine or not. They do not see me as a woman. I'm one of their chums. And because of that, I was always relegated to sitting on the sidelines and watching these guys that I was secretly in love with chasing after other girls, and then I had to be their friend and their support as they would sit there and talk about their feelings about this girl anyway. And so this guy, this particular guy, there have been many of them. I have lots of stories of failed romances, so I'm very good at failed romance. Anyway, but this guy was absolutely head over heels in love with this girl, and he would talk about her all the time. And All of you ladies who've been the friend before, I'm sure know what I'm talking about. There are girls out there who love to keep guys on the hook solely to keep them on the hook. She's a man-eater. But heaven forbid if he actually moves on and tries to pursue someone else, that's when she'll wander over and start flirting with him and keep him on the hook just enough so he doesn't go to greener pastures. Anyway, and it was one of those things that I've been in that scenario so many times that I knew in an instant. I just knew in an instant what this girl was like. And then one day I was actually able to meet her and chat with her, and watching her with him, it was just, gosh, it was angering for me. Can you not see that she is just using you? Like, she doesn't have any interest in you. And so that feeling, I mean, seeing that scenario and being in that feeling of like wanting to smack the guy and be like, dude, what is your problem? Why in the world are you not seeing, what's going on? And so that was definitely something I had to weave into my books, well, into Flame and Ember specifically, and has definitely cropped up in others of my stories. So yeah, it's Susanna, not specifically. I wouldn't say, I didn't know the girl well enough to actually base an entire character after her, but this archetype of the man-eater, I guess you would say, is very much inspired by her, and frankly a lot of the other girls that I've seen over the years who've done that. Okay, here's the thing. A lot of times we love to portray writing as it's just this easy thing that just flows, that that the muse is there or she's not, and the reality is that's not the case. I mean, it is the case that sometimes writing is easier than others. Writing is not always easy. And frankly, as a professional writer and someone who wants to make money off of it, you don't have the luxury of sitting around and saying, well, I'm not feeling it, so I'm not going to write. I have to write no matter what. So there are always, every single one of my books, I have various struggles with. And while Flame and Ember itself was not hard to write overall, I would say that I really struggled with writing the kissing scene. I write my books chronologically, so the first kissing scene that I wrote was when Simon and Mina are, writing together, and they're just connecting, and things are going really well, and they kiss, and it was really hard to write. First off, because I actually never been kissed, so my experience with the actual romance side of things, not super plentiful.
She's lonely.
Most of my friends are married, and all my family are married, and so I've definitely had a front row seat to watching romance and watching relationships, and that definitely has informed my writing. But when it comes to actually things like, what does it feel like to kiss someone? I don't have a whole lot of experience with that one. So I really struggled with it. And I reached that point and I just couldn't think of a single word. And so actually it was really wonderful because I ended up sitting down and opening up my, at the time, one of my favorite authors was Sarah M. Eaton. She writes sweet historical romance as well. She was my introduction into the genre, actually. And so I went and opened up her books, and I went to each of the kiss scenes and I read through them, trying to see like, okay, what can I learn from someone else who clearly does it well, because I love her books and she's popular in the genre and everything, and what can I learn from her? And it took me a little while to figure it out, but I started seeing a pattern that it was more about the emotion and what they were feeling rather than the actual physical description of what was happening. The excitement, the joy, the wonder, there's a lot of those kind of things that I can't imagine what that would feel like. And it was a lot more comfortable to focus on that than it was on the physical aspect of what they were actually doing. So that is the one area of the book that was a little tricky to write. Favorite scenes. Oh my gosh, there are so many of them in Flame and Ember. as I said, this was one of my easiest books ever to write. It was something that there was quite a few of the scenes that I had in my very clearly in my mind when I started writing, and there were just so many moments in that book that I just absolutely not only loved writing, loved plotting it out, loved writing it, and still tug at my heartstrings when I think of them. And I would say first and foremost would be when Mina stands up to Simon. So at the very end, when she finally has had enough and she leaves, she gets in the carriage and she goes and he chases after her, and they stop and they fight in the road. That was such a fun scene to write. That was so much fun to write because, again, I have been that doormat. And honestly, even, I am so much better at not allowing myself to be used and abused by people. But honestly, I don't think I've ever had that ability to really tell what I'm feeling. And so to give her that moment where she just unleashes everything and just speaks from her heart, it just was so cathartic. It was so fun to write. But then on top of that, I think it's just such a great moment that I really love that.
Yes! Yeah!
With that, I would also say I really enjoyed, surprisingly enough, the first scene. Well, I guess it would say the from the point where Mina realizes that Simon and Finch are talking about her, and that moment where she realizes what they're saying about her, and that heartbreaking moment. I really love writing scenes of pain, not because I like causing my characters pain so much, but because it's one of those things that I feel like all of us have those moments when something happens that just absolutely strikes us to the heart, and it's just so devastating. And so to be able to capture that emotion, and especially to work it into a story where in the end she gets her happy ever after, things work out in the end, and that I love that. And so starting with that, and then when she meets up with Simon in the park the next day, or not, it wasn't the next day, it was sometime later, they meet up in the park, and he wants to apologize to her and then insults her again by not remembering her. Oh my gosh, I love writing that scene, and I know this sounds sadistic, but I love putting my characters through the ringers, because the thing is the more difficult it is for them to reach that happily ever after, whether it is their character arc or it is their riding off to the sunset with their significant other, the harder that is, the more satisfying I find it. And so honestly, I really focus on writing books that I want to read, and that's what I love, is I want struggle, and so I love that scene.
And now for something completely different.
And I will say as well too, I really enjoy the dinner scene when Simon's family is in town and Susanna's there, and Thea and Frederick are the only ones who are really standing up for Mina. And Mina's struggling with everything that's going on, and she's struggling. And oh my gosh, I loved Frederick. I loved writing him and giving him the freedom to say things that I would never say, and all the different ways that he needles the other people at the table and kind of mocks them and makes fun of them. It was really fun to write Frederick's scene as well.
Best day ever!
And with that, actually, I will also say too, the scene at the end with Thea and Frederick confronting Simon. Oh, I loved it. It may sound strange to say that I get so much joy out of it, but honestly, even as an author, even though I know scenes are coming, even though I have them planned out in my head, there's something about seeing them come to life and seeing those words on the page as they start flowing from my brain into my fingers and into the computer. Like there's just something so wonderful about that. And so that scene where first off, Frederick kicks Simon and just reams into him. Loved it. And then the fact that Frederick then comes and punches Simon and, and gets upset at him for making my wife cry because you made her friend cry, which makes my wife cry, which makes me upset.
You hit the kid. I hit you.
I wouldn't say that my books are overtly comedic. I don't strive to write comedies, but I do love moments of comedy and moments of humor. And for me, at least, in my sick little twisted humorous way, I thought that scene was really funny.
Laughter through tears is my favorite emotion. Thanks, Annette.
Well, I think that's it. I think I've covered everything. I'm sure when I finish this, I'm going to think of many, many more things that I would love to share about this book. This is a book that it has such a special place in my heart because it is my first historical romance. And as I said, I was at a rough place when I wrote it, and I was in a rough place when I published it, and it changed my life. It is what has made me being a full-time author possible because it showed me that I was in the wrong genre. I was writing the wrong genre. I needed to be a historical romance writer. And for that reason, I will always love Flame and Ember, and it will always have a very, very dear part of my heart. This has been Author Chat with M.A. Nichols. Click subscribe and follow to be notified when new audiobooks and behind-the-scenes information are uploaded.